Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of What the Observer Sees, where we talk about gamification and how we can apply it in the corporate world as well as real life. So, my name is Bob, and I'm here with Arun, and today we have a very special guest speaker who is well versed in the financial space. His name is Ming Ern, and he's joining us for this episode where we talk about finance and accounting, finance literacy, and whether we can gamify this learning experience about financial literacy in the corporate world as well as the private life. So Arun, we talk about financial literacy, right? My understanding is that financial literacy is about understanding and effectively using any aspects of financial skills, right? So that you can manage your personal finance, manage your budgeting, manage your investing, so on and so forth. What are your thoughts on financial literacy?
Okay, that's a very good question, Bob. But the way I would think about it is having that knowledge or that foundation of financial literacy to help you make smarter decisions, right? I think that you could go into a lot of different angles on how it can improve your private, your professional life. But to me, it's all about taking some of that intelligence and making smarter decisions, right? So to me, that's the way I look at financial literacy, rather than looking into the theory and the concepts. I mean, those are just the fundamentals, but essentially what you want to do is you want to make smarter decisions, right? Yeah.
Right. And that is interesting. And Ming Ern, so thank you for coming onto the show. And welcome to our show where we talk about, in today's episode about finance. And I know that you are very well versed in the financial space. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what are your thoughts on financial literacy? Maybe do they echo Arun's thoughts on the topic as well?
Yeah, of course, most definitely. I mean, both your definitions are correct. I also, when I was asked about this thing, I also decided to go check it out online just to see what the definitions were. And usually the definitions revolve around having that knowledge to use financial tools to make wise decisions. So I think removing all those aspects about financial tools is just enabling a person to make wise decisions with regards to finance, money. And it's different for different people because it really depends on what the context is, where you are at, for what purpose you are using it, and what stage of life you are in. So that I think is in a nutshell. So depending on where we are at, in the corporate sense, in the personal sense, and depending on what stage of life we are in.
And then, if you could, we didn't do a formal introduction, so maybe Ming Ern, you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
That's right. So I'm involved in the training and development sector, and I started off doing a lot of talent development, but I've actually decided more to focus on an area that I've always been interested in, which is both games and finance. I love these two areas. Typically, it doesn't quite mix in many cases, but I really like these two areas, and I think we found a way to do it. So what I do today is I help people who are not from a finance background, who don't have a finance and accounting background, to understand and appreciate finance, business finance, accounting, the financial statements in a fun way. So we do it in a really crazy, fun environment, and I think the real benefit of that is not only do people come out actually understanding this topic better, but they can get it out of their heads. It really sticks in. Even if they tried to forget, they couldn't.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can see the relationship between games and learning something that is traditionally viewed as very mundane, kind of boring, learning formulas. So definitely I think there's a lot of correlation. So my question is, when you look back at all those participants or people that you've coached and kind of went through your programs, what do you see as some of the big challenges? Maybe we can start off with the corporate environment first. What do you see from people who are not from that background? What are some of the challenges they face?
I think a lot of preconceived ideas. There's people sometimes feel intimidated by a lot of the financial terms and jargon that they hear, and it looks complicated, especially when you go into financial, the calculations, the formulas, and all that. I don't know whether it's universal, but I feel, I just have this sensing or feeling that people tend to get quite intimidated when they look at a lot of mathematical formulas, things to do with math or science. So that already forms a little bit of a barrier, and it doesn't help when they're out there in the working world and they ask questions. People are not patient enough to try and explain some of these things. So a lot of times people just pretend, or they just try and get by, without actually being able to get their real questions answered. And I know that we live in an age where all this information is supposed to be at our fingertips. But I guess many times people come out of certain meetings and all that, and they just forget to catch up on these topics, or they don't even know where to start. Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, that comes back to the point that learning retention is not as effective as it used to be. We cannot retain. We might learn, but we cannot retain.
Definitely.
Right? Yeah.
In fact, I would say that besides that, I find that one of the biggest barriers to actually learning this topic is context. Yeah, because a lot of times when we begin to study these kind of topics, we have nowhere to actually apply the knowledge that we are picking up. So I mean, I can learn accounting, I can learn finance, I can learn about the financial statements, but maybe I'm working in a company and I have no place to apply that information. I can look at the statements, but I have no place to apply it, and there's no emotional connection to that.
Yeah.
You know, so it's very different from somebody that's running a business. So I sometimes say, if you're running a business of your own, you will eventually learn about financial statements. You will learn how to read it, either sooner or later. Because the moment you lose money, the moment you make a decision and it has a financial impact on your pockets, you will quickly start to try to pick up that topic quickly, try to understand what happened, grill your accountants or your finance people. Tell me what happened. Why is it that I've lost? Why is it I worked so hard the whole year and I'm not making a profit? So then it gets very emotional, and then they learn very quickly because they are living it out. They are not just reading in a book. It's experiential for them.
That's right.
And it's interesting that you mentioned, learning about finance in whether it's the corporate world or the private life, and getting to know what the losses are coming from or whatnot. And I did some digging into S&P Global. So in 2014, right, they conducted a global financial literacy survey. So it measures three aspects, or the three pillars they call financial knowledge, and then there's one financial behavior and financial attitude. And in 2014, believe it or not, Malaysia scored about, I think, 36% in terms of financial literacy, which measures all three pillars. And now we fast forward to 2020, and we improved to 59.7%. So that's roughly like 1.6 times the increase, right? But in contrast to the world's average is probably about 60%-ish. So we are slightly lagging behind. But this is up to 2020, and with all the fintech coming in, all the increased access into the financial space that's readily available out there in today's world, right? So how concerning is this, in your opinion, for both Arun and Ming Ern as well, since you both are in the financial space, right? So how concerning is this, not only for the corporate space, but also for, like, for example, your personal life, and even more importantly, I guess, for the youths of today, where financial literacy is not so prominent in the education space for all primary school to high school, and they grow up and they move into the real world with this.
Can I just I just want to say something here, that financial literacy and financial wisdom are quite different. You can be financially literate, you can study about it, you can understand the concepts and the financial tools, and you know how to use it. But whether you are wise, the way that you apply that or not, has a completely different angle to it. And I also want to say that even though we talk about corporate finance and we talk about these financial statements and all that, literacy is very, very broad. Depending on where you are at, you may not actually need to have a full understanding of cash flows, profit and loss statements, balance sheets, and all that. Sometimes it could be as simple as just learning to save, or not overspending. That itself is a form of financial literacy. And I think that kind of financial literacy is probably a lot more useful than having a head full of knowledge about all the different ratios and different budgeting methods and all that. So when we talk about measurements on how literate people are about financial matters, first of all, I have no idea how these measurements are done. I don't know how. I could try and find out, but I don't know how they get the statistics. But we just have to look at what's happening around us to get an idea of how concerning these matters are. I think what's more important than just financial literacy is really financial wisdom that needs to be imparted to people.
No, I completely agree with Ming Ern. I think that from my perspective, I think I started with, I didn't do finance and accounting in university. I kind of learned on the job as I went. But I started with that basic concept, like what Ming Ern said, right? Starting with that budgeting, right? And today it's something that I do quite religiously on a day-to-day basis, right? But I started maybe 12 years ago, and I have every budget for 12 years since I started working. So it's quite an amazing file, because you can actually kind of see how things have evolved over the years. And so that has allowed me to understand, like, that wisdom element, like where can I be a little bit more aggressive, where should I be more conservative, and that has also allowed me to understand, like, financial investments, does that make sense for my stage of life, what kind of instruments should I be thinking of. But I think it came down fundamentally to that concept of, like, let's start with something very basic like budgeting. And let's say when I started working, maybe I was earning like 2,000 something or 3,000, whatever it was, and how can I manage it so that even on that salary I was always in a surplus, right? And I was able to save. So I think it started with that idea and then kind of evolved. So I think that's coming back to that question, right? It's not really about that knowledge of what is ROI or what is working capital ratios and all that. I think that is not really the crux of the problem. I think it goes to something much more fundamental, which is just looking at simple plus, minus, divide, times, and figuring it out from
Yeah.
yeah.
So we're going on a different tangent here. It's not so much about being having all this financial intelligence, but it's really knowing how to apply that thing. And I think what Arun is describing is so important. If anything, today is even more important. A lesson everybody can take up on that, which is living within your means. And if like you're doing a budget and you can see where your expenses are and how much is coming in, I mean, it's a liberating feeling to know that you've got a surplus at the end, that you're not going to run into a situation where you need to run around looking for extra funds, just because you forgot some expense that you needed to pay for.
Yeah, sounds good, because I also heard that the Ringgit Plus co-founder and director, this guy named Han Liu, he said on FMT, so Free Malaysia Today, that it's not just the young who are often facing money issues. Sometimes even professionals up to their late 30s sometimes continue to face financial difficulties. And you guys mentioned that it's not so much about having all the broad and vast knowledge. It's about keeping it simple. Every month, how do you save a certain amount, and it continues to roll. So he mentioned that even people up to 30s, right? Some people up to 30s, they're even having difficulties saving up to, let's say, 500 ringgit. And he also noted that some people don't even save, more than, I don't know, let's say 100 ringgit a month. And that's a very that's a very severe issue, right? If you talk about financial literacy and understanding how it works, even
that's going a lot towards the personal financial management, But of course, if you're in a corporate setting, having that financial literacy, financial knowledge allows you to apply that on behalf of the organization that you work with. Yeah, so that and you look at people, their spending habits and the way they manage things, it can be vastly different. They can be good stewards in an organization in terms of the advice they suggest to the company, investments, which direction to go, big things. But then their own personal financial can be pretty messed up, and it can be the other way around as well. So I think these are two we got to have some congruence there.
Yeah, that's true. So then if that's the case, right? If that's the case, that sometimes there is a disparity between what we do personally and what we do professionally, and vice versa, then what would your approach be to kind of drive that adoption so that they become more holistic, they become more well-rounded from a personal and professional setting, in regards to just finance management literacy as a whole?
I think we have to start off with good financial habits first. I think that would be a key thing. Starting off with good financial habits. Things like doing budgets. That's a good financial habit. Knowing how much comes in, where the money is going to. A lot of times with a company, that is reflected in the financial statements. So if you learn to read that, or you learn to understand that, or you know how it's constructed, that really helps. But you can apply back into your personal life, right? The one area that I think the congruent part that is difficult to reconcile would be the risk appetite. Obviously, when you make decisions for a company, you're not solo, it's in a group, and that will have a different risk profile from your personal. Yeah, but starting off with the basics will be important. So like doing your budget, knowing how much comes in, how much goes out, removing unnecessary expenditure, wastage. For large companies, sometimes they can absorb some of these things without knowing that it's there, and they can continue for a period of time. We often say that in good times, right, everything is okay. They can just ignore some of these wastages. But when the economy tightens, when things become more challenging, then a lot of these things get pulled up, and then the elimination process starts. But for personal, we may not have that kind of luxury. So there are a lot of wastages that can happen in our personal lives that we can get rid of. Things like I think subscriptions are one common things that's quite common everywhere. You go join a gym and then it's like, I'm going to use it, but then you don't, and then every month you have to pay like 100 ringgit, or you get caught up with some fantastic internet deal. I'm not against them. I'm just saying that we have to work within what our means are and what we actually need. Sometimes it seems so fantastic, and then we go subscribe to a very high bandwidth when we don't really need that. You don't need the bandwidth in the first place. And a lot of these things, once you sign up, it's contractual. You sign on for a 12-month, 24-month contract. Can't exactly exit just like as you want. So then you are laden with this expense for that period of time. Yeah. So in answer to your question, I think it's coming to the basics first, and then we look at other areas of where you can do the reconciliation.
No, that's a good way of thinking about it. I think for me personally as well, it comes down to that habit lah. But instinctively, I didn't think of what I was doing as a habit, but over time I can see that it has developed, right? I think it's just about knowing that something needs to give and something needs to change, and over time that becomes a habit that rolls over time, and then you kind of see the results over years. I don't think you see the results in a couple of months unless you have some drastic expenditures that you can pretty much shift off. But to me, I completely agree with that. Habits kind of drive everything forward. Yeah.
So I just thought that maybe there are three quite simple habits that we can look at. One is the budgeting part, knowing what comes in, what goes out, where it goes to. The other one is questioning the purchases, or questioning where the money is being spent. Yeah, especially for big purchases. I think for companies or for personal, private is both is equally important. When you need to make a purchase, when you want to buy something, I think sometimes you try and get approval even from finance. They ask a lot of questions. What's the return? Do we need this thing? Yeah, so we need to have these kind of barriers or these kind of filters before we just go off and buy whatever we think we need or we want. Like, do you really need it? Is it a need or is it a want? Do you have to buy it now? Is it something that you must get it right now? We live in a culture or an age where instant gratification seems to be the norm. Yeah, and sometimes that prevents us from making good decisions. Because we want it like right now. I want it right now. And you don't take the time to study or to investigate a bit more. And probably questions like, is there a replacement for this thing? Is there, do I have to buy this brand? Is there another brand for this thing? Yeah, so things like that. These questions you can implement these things as a habit as well. Yeah. So one is doing that budget, knowing what goes in, what goes out. Another one is really questioning the purchases. Do you really need it? And probably the third one I can think of is like in an organization, you don't make decisions on your own. You consult with your team, people with expertise. And so in personal life, I think if you're married, you have a partner, or your friends who they are in this line, and they seem to know what they're doing. They spend their money well. They are not constantly in need. Anything you can bounce ideas off them. You can consult them. You can ask them questions. So if you have a spouse or a partner, talk to them. Yeah, get a consultation going. And sometimes somebody else they can give very, very good feedback.
Yep, fair enough. And those are really good tips. And it's all about, again, keeping it simple, right? And I know that you have a simulation that you developed, right, for the finance for non-finance people.
Yes.
Right? That tackles all these three angles, and as well as implementing that, keeping it simple. Finance shouldn't be that difficult, right? So just walk us through in brief, like how does that finance for non-finance sim work, and how does it get us to appreciate the numbers a little bit more?
Okay, so this simulation was it's not me alone. Yeah, I developed it with my brother-in-law, who's himself an accountant. Yeah, has his own firm and all that. Earlier on I mentioned that when you run your own business, you will learn it sooner or later. So that idea was where it came from. That if you want people to learn this topic quickly, they need to actually be able to go through that experience without the risk involved. Yeah. So if we encourage everybody to go out there and start their own businesses, that there will be very, very high risk. The rate of failure of business is there. Plus, there's a lot of financial impact to them. So what we've done instead is that we've taken a business and we've converted it into a game, and get what we do is get people to play the game, and as they participate in the game, they do the financial statements. They actually construct the financial statements from scratch, and that helps them to understand where the numbers are coming from, and how it guides them in making their decisions moving forward, and so on and so forth. So everything that comes with running a business, as much as possible, we try to get that into the simulation so they experience it over a period of 2 days. I think Arun has had a chance to participate as well. It's pretty intense. Yeah, I don't know whether Bob
Yep.
said it before. It's pretty intense. They go through those 2 days, and so it's not just about the financial statements. It's all the emotions that come with it as well. Because financial matters are not just numbers; they have emotional impact as well, and a lot of other aspects come into play, like your team. How you work together, how you negotiate, how you come to an agreement on how things should be done. Yeah, so all these elements come into play because what I want them to experience is not just the financial side, but everything that is associated with it as well. And that's the reason why they can't really get it out of their heads. So in this particular simulation, they will run a business. Typically, it's a manufacturing kind of a business, and they will compete with other companies that are in the same market doing exactly identically the same thing. They have to fight in a market where there are limited business opportunities. And along the way, they learn their financial statements, and all of the financial concepts and principles that we talk about come alive in the gameplay.
Yeah, no, I can agree. I think when I went through it, the part that I really liked was that it was centered around manufacturing, and I think because manufacturing is, it's a kind of a step-by-step approach in business. If I compare that to like running a bank, for example, the same kind of product movement is a lot harder to visualize for people, and so the concepts become a little bit grayer for them. I think manufacturing kind of helped put the product and the manufacturing process and how it eventually ended up in the customer through a sale. I think that entire process is a lot more effective at explaining financial literacy versus like if I were to take it for a bank or a telco, for example, or something of that nature, where the product is not really a physical item.
We wanted it to be tangible, and we wanted it to be something that they could feel with their hands. So just for everybody's context here, those who are listening in, this is it's not a computer-based simulation. It's a board game. It's a live simulation. So they get to touch the pieces, they get to move the pieces as they play, and I believe that is one of the reasons why it sticks in the mind. They complete the simulation, and I've met people who have done this simulation 6, 7, 8 years ago. They still remember it. They still remember the simulation. They remember the experiences they have gone through. And as long as you can remember what you've gone through, you can bring that knowledge back into financial statements, and you can start anytime. Even if you didn't continue pursuing the area of study after the simulation, you can revisit that later on again, because you can remember the movements. You can remember what's going on. And essentially, that's what the financial statements are. They are a reflection of your business. Everything that happens in the business gets recorded into the financial statements. So it's helping them to have that context, where the numbers come from, what the numbers mean, and what do the numbers imply for the future in making decisions. The other reason why we've made it into a kind of a board game kind of scenario is because this simulation has very little luck element involved. It's very business oriented, and everything depends on the decisions that are made by the team. There's no throwing of dice and all that. So because it is a simulation that's based on decisions that's made by the team, and many people play it simultaneously, we often get a lot of creative situations happening within the simulation itself. People try to form partnerships, or they try and build a consortium around the entire business. They want to control the pricing. They want to dominate the market, and these are real things that happen in the market. Right. So as the facilitators of the game, we also need to be there to respond to situations that happen like that in real life. And so that's why it's actually physically done. So
I think it's fantastic because if you were to create a digital game, there are always certain limits to the different permutations and combinations that come out of it, right?
Yeah.
But in a physical board, in a physical game, you don't limit it, like it's limited only to the creativity of the participants, right?
Yeah.
So they can really explore it and see where it can go, as long as it can be executed, it can be done, and it can also be reflected in the financial statements.
Correct.
So I completely agree. I think a digital version of it would be very limiting in terms of what it could actually do. And so you're very constrained on what you can actually teach or you can impart, right? But so I still remember it, and I think I will going forward.
I would liken this to make no. Please don't misunderstand me. I think digital simulations are great. They have great tools.
Yeah.
They have very specific objectives. What are the things that they want to teach, and it's fixed. The kind of simulation that we have right now with this board game is probably very similar to the game books that people used to play, things like Dungeons and Dragons and all that. Where they give you a set of rules. And then they have the game master or the dungeon master, and this person applies their imagination to scenarios. And the players themselves are also looking for ways around the situation. So anything can happen in the gameplay. Players propose a certain action, and the dungeon master has to go think about, okay, is this possible? Yep, I didn't think of that, but they are proposing to do this. So what now? How do I address this situation now? Yeah, so very similar to that, very fluid environment, and I think that's the reason why they don't just learn about the financial statements. They also learn very quickly things like business strategy, different ways to tackle different issues that are happening. So many different learnings come out from the simulation itself. How the team works together, communicate with one another, right? How they set goals for each other. Yeah, how conscientious they are in terms of the SOP, the way they do things. Because if there are no proper SOPs established within the team, the gameplay gets very messy after some time, and they realize that people make a lot of unnecessary mistakes. Carelessness sets in. Whereas if things were very organized and very structured, then they will find that everything runs smoothly after that. And then we can draw that parallel back into a business environment.
Yeah, I completely agree. Bob, you wanted to.
Oh, yeah. So on digital sims, and digital game teaching about the finance aspect, I actually do have one, but it's not multiplayer. It's more singular player based. So maybe that permutation allows for a better digital adaptation lah. But that's my opinion, right? So I know a mobile game. It's called Rat Race, and it teaches people on a personal level, basically how to escape the rat race, right? And obtain some form of financial freedom. So it gets people to go through certain aspects. For example, like teaching them maybe the very basics of investing, maybe the very basics of budgeting itself, right? Going right down to the basics again. Teaching people how to tolerate risk to a certain extent. It may or may not cover the whole aspect of it, but someone who does not have a financial background, at least I go in there and I see, I might be able to pick up something from this, be it basic, be it maybe slightly more advanced, and they don't cover too much of that jargon. So at least I know, okay, this A means A, B means B. I don't need to get a whole dictionary to find out, this means this means that. So it teaches me a certain amount of literacy in terms of how can I free myself from A, B, and C, what liabilities are holding me back, and how can I further build on what generates income for me, or what generates the possibility of a financial freedom in the end, which is the goal of the game.
Yeah, gives you context so you can apply the knowledge to it immediately.
Yeah, exactly. So it's quite applicable. I don't know if it's contextualized to Malaysian regulations, so on and so forth. That I have limited knowledge, so I'll rather not comment on that. But at least it gives the sense of basics lah, really.
Yeah, I think the beauty of simulations is that you actually get to apply your knowledge immediately, and you see results. You don't have to wait. You see results fairly quickly. That's what motivates people in terms of their learning.
Correct. All right. So, Ming Ern, going back to again, all that we have discussed today, and tying it back to to all the topics that we have opened up and explored, right? Are there any additional pointers that you could push out to the audience, or any questions that you can ask them to check related to financial literacy and accounting off the top of your head? Any key pointers to sort of wrap our entire discussion up?
I think I want to let Arun go first on this one.
Yeah, sure, Arun. Why not? Let's go.
For me, I think if I were to leave a pointer for the audience, I think it would be just to reassess your situation as it is today, lah. Right? I think you can't roll back the years and hope for a better position. So if you're in a situation where you lack the knowledge or the wisdom in financial literacy, start today, lah, right? Take small actions, build that habits like what Ming Ern kind of mentioned, right? Build those habits to even start considering simple questions that you can ask yourself. Should I be purchasing this now, or should I be delaying this for another day? Right? Even something as simple as that, to me, is very effective at starting to change that mindset, right? So rather than leaving the audience with really a really big idea or big challenge to overcome, it's as simple as that. Just ask yourself that question on a regular basis, and if you can do that consistently, I think that will ultimately lead you down the road where you can make better decisions, make better financial decisions as a result, right? So that would be my takeaway, and kind of like my message to the audience. Like, just look at it from a very granular point of view, and just ask yourself that question on a daily basis.
Great advice, man, Arun. I would say that the challenge for today is that we are addressing a very, very broad base in the audience group. We have those who are looking at this from a personal perspective, and we also have those from a corporate perspective. So I think from the corporate perspective side, it's not just, I really believe that you do need to really understand the financial statements, especially if you're planning to move up the corporate ladder. As you progress up the corporate ladder, I tell people this all the time. You either understand it or you pretend to understand it, because it gets harder and harder. When you're in a higher up position, it gets harder and harder to admit that you don't fully understand the financial statements, or you don't know how to read it, right? So in that part of your journey, really take time out to look into this area, to educate yourself, and to build up your knowledge in this area, because it's a journey. It's not something that you acquire immediately. I think even for my simulation, our objective is really giving them the fundamentals, the basics to understand, and then hoping that they will take that journey later on. So when I do it for companies, I do meet up with their finance department, meet up with their HR, and have a discussion about what can you do after the simulation to help your people continue that journey. Because all we have done is whet their appetite, got them really excited, and then they're ready to go. They've got that drive to go. So if you're in the corporate sector, you must work on this area, because as you move up, you will be responsible for making decisions which will come from understanding financial statements. And so if you don't fully understand it, sometimes that results in decisions that are made that doesn't make a lot of financial sense, or is detrimental to the company instead of helping the organization. Yeah, so perhaps later, if we have more specific sessions addressing a specific crowd, we can share more. Yeah, from the personal side, those who are listening more from a personal perspective, I heard this advice a long time ago, and I think it's so applicable even to myself, even until today. I heard that you don't want to spend money you don't have buying things that you don't need to impress people that you don't like.
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
Yeah, so just be conscientious about your spending, and that in itself is a big, it really helps. You may not have all of the financial knowledge to use all the different tools that are in the market, but that single piece of advice, I think, is just applicable to everyone. I've tried to live with that motto for as long as I can. Yeah, so very, very careful with the things that I buy, and before buying things, I always ask why do I need that. If it's just buying something to impress people, to create an impression, I would be very, very cautious of that. And the second thing is to be very careful about greed. I think throughout my life, every mistake that I've made when it comes to financials, investments, and all that, it's always been because of greed. It's because I've been greedy, even though sometimes we an investment opportunity comes along, and it just doesn't make sense. We try and put the numbers together, it didn't quite make sense, but it's an opportunity, and I've gone into it even though it didn't quite make sense. The driving force has always been greed, and I think it's never paid off. Greed doesn't pay off well.